If you have a true scary story you want to share with the channel, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to send it my way. And of course, thank you. So, I have a story about when my girlfriend and I broke up back in the late 90s. I'm happily married now with a kid, so it doesn't bother me as much to talk about it, but there was a point in time where this story really bothered me. Not because it was super creepy, but because this person I was in love with was so quick to turn, well, crazy. A small bit of context. This was the late 90s. I was about 23 at the time of this happening. I was dating this girl named Maddie, and I was genuinely in love with her. We'd been dating for 2 years at the time of all this. We didn't live together, but we did stay at each other's place a few times. She still lived with her parents, which made that a bit awkward. But there was nothing beyond that. We hadn't spoken about our future together or anything like that. We didn't mention marriage or kids. And at no point was there any indication, at least for me, that she was unhappy with things. As far as I could tell, we were a decently happy couple. We were still young, still had a lot going on in life, and we saw each other pretty frequently. I was happy with how it was, and sure, I wanted to consider moving forward with her, maybe moving her into my place to see how that went, but I wasn't in any rush, and I thought that would be a future issue. And this story starts in the dumbest way, with a scratch-off ticket. I had stopped at a gas station to fill up my tank one night, and for some dumb reason, I had bought a few scratch-off tickets. Much to my surprise, I had actually stopped in exactly when fate wanted me to, and I won something like $200. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd ever won in a lottery, so I was over the moon. My immediate thought was, I should take Maddie on a date night, thinking I should go ahead and blow this $200 on a nice dinner and a movie or something. Just something to show that I appreciated her. So the next day I called her and we were talking about things, and I mentioned that we should go out that Friday. I made a comment about how the universe wanted us to splurge a little, mentioning that I had won the money on the scratcher, and she laughed and said something about it being fate. Nothing that was said was a red flag. I thought we were both joking when we were saying these things. Come to find out, Maddie was pretty well dead set on the idea of it being fate. Something I would come to find out that Friday night. So, I got dressed up in my nicest clothes, which weren't nice to be honest. Again, I was a dumb kid still at that point. I called Maddie and told her I was on my way, and then went to pick her up. She looked great. She was dressed up way beyond what I was, and I was elated that we were going to spend this time together. We decided on dinner first, that we would go eat and then check out what was playing at the theater, which sounded like a solid plan to me. She wanted to go to a decently expensive place. I agreed, told her that it was a great idea, and we headed out to eat. We got to the restaurant, I played the gentlemanly role and opened her door for her, and we walked to the front with our arms linked. Basically, we were pretending to be a wealthy couple that was madly in love, which is exactly what I wanted to do that night. We sat down, we ordered, and we talked about whatever it was that we talked about. She even ordered a glass of wine to, quote, celebrate the occasion, which was a weird thing for her to say at the time, but I didn't think much of it. We ate our food, and around the end of the meal, the waiter came with the check. I remember making a joking comment about, "Oh, allow me to get that, my dear," just being silly. I put the money in the check thing, handed it back to the waiter, and told them to keep the change. And then made a comment about how we should get going so we could check out what movies were playing. I started to stand up, and she reached out and grabbed my hand, letting out a slight chuckle while staring at me with this look of expectation. I sat back down and stared at her for a moment, just awkwardly sitting in silence, until a few moments later when her smile faded. I asked her what was wrong, if everything was okay, and she looked back to me and asked, "Aren't you forgetting something?" I looked around at the table and then around the restaurant, trying to figure out what she meant. I even checked my pocket to make sure that I had my wallet, then looked at her and said, "No, I have everything." She just stared at me like I had kicked her dog. Like, me saying no was the equivalent of me telling her that I hated her and wished she was dead. And to her, maybe it was, but to me, I was just confused about what it was I was forgetting. We sat there just staring at each other for an uncomfortable amount of time, before I asked her what she actually meant. Her face became angry and she stood up and basically stomped off like a child out of the restaurant. I followed her because I was so confused about what I had done wrong. She got to my car and immediately yelled at me to take her home. I asked her what about the movie, and she threw out several expletives about how she didn't want to go to the movies, that she just wanted to go home. I said okay, and just got in the car. The second I got the car on the road, she started in on me, yelling about how I was a manipulative a-hole, how I was a jerk, how she hated me. Just so many things that made zero sense to me. I asked her what the hell I had done and why she was so mad, and she screamed something at me that I never could have expected. "You didn't propose to me like you were supposed to." I stared out at the road, my jaw clenching. She then mentioned that I had said that it was fate, that we were supposed to be together, that she expected me to propose because of my comment about the universe wanting us to go out on this date, and that by not proposing, I had manipulated her. I want to reiterate that we had been dating for 2 years, and she had never acted like this. We'd had small arguments, but she was always very reserved, and they never turned into shouting. I told her that I never said anything about proposing to her, that my universe comment was a joke because I had randomly won a little bit of money, so we could afford an expensive date, not that I wanted to get married. She started yelling about how I was supposed to propose, that we were supposed to be getting married, and then asked me if I even wanted to get married to her. Apparently, I hesitated to answer too much, because it was less than a second or two later when I felt the stinging blast of pepper spray in my face. Yes, in her infinite wisdom and anger, because I didn't immediately say I wanted to marry her, Maddie grabbed her pepper spray off of her bag and blasted me, the person driving the car at 40-ish miles per hour, in the face. Of course, we were in the car together, with the windows up, so she got hit by it too. I don't really know what her end goal was other than to just kill us both in a fiery car crash. I panicked because I couldn't see or breathe, and I tried to brake and swerve out of the road as quickly as I could, just to stop myself from smashing into another car. I ended up hitting a light pole, thankfully not at full speed. Neither of us were hurt. My airbags didn't even deploy, but my car had a good amount of damage to the front end. I jumped out of the car, gasping for air and trying to figure out what to do with my eyes. Maddie did the same, but even though she was dealing with the blowback from shooting pepper spray in a closed area, she was still screaming about how this was all my fault, how I had ruined her life. While I was standing there and trying to compose myself, I looked over and saw the red and blue lights flash as a cop pulled up. That was fun, trying to explain the whole thing to the officer. I tried to tell him that we were dating, that we'd had an argument, and that she blasted me with pepper spray. She was screaming incoherently in between coughing fits about how I had ruined her life, that she hated me, and so forth. Thankfully, my calm demeanor won out over my anger, because the officer didn't take any action against me. They helped me to get a tow truck out to the scene, and were able to get us back to my place. When he left, I asked Maddie if she wanted to come inside to talk about it, but she actually slapped me and told me that she had wished I had died when we crashed, then started walking. I know the right thing to do would have been to stop her and tell her not to walk home. It was a pretty good distance, several miles, but I didn't care anymore. I told her to have a nice life, and I went inside my apartment. Then I took a shower and went to bed. Then I woke up the next morning to someone banging on my front door. When I answered it, it was Maddie's dad, and Maddie was standing there behind him crying her eyes out. I asked what he wanted, and he started yelling at me about how I had almost killed his daughter with my irresponsible driving, that I should have driven her home, blah blah blah. When he was finished, I simply asked him if she had told him that she pepper sprayed me while we were driving and that was why we had crashed, and that when the tow truck got us here, she slapped me and walked away when I invited her in, so that she didn't have to walk home. He paused, looked back at her, and asked, "Why did you pepper spray him?" Since she wasn't answering, I did. I told him about how she was mad because I didn't propose to her at dinner, so she maced me. He looked shocked at the whole thing, which told me that she hadn't told him about any of it. He asked her if that was true, and she just nodded slightly. He looked back at me, then her again, and let out a heavy sigh before mumbling an apology and leaving. I'm not sure what she expected out of that situation, but it definitely did not go her way. Thankfully, that was the end of our relationship. She tried to call me to apologize, but I just told her that she could have killed us both with what she did, and that I couldn't be with someone that was so willing to do something so stupid over such a small disagreement. And that was that. Thankfully, I wasn't hurt, and she wasn't hurt. But we both now have knowledge of what it's like to be pepper sprayed. I ended up shelling out a good amount of money on my car to get all that fixed. The damage wasn't too extensive, so it was what it was. I moved on, found someone else, and now I'm married and very happy with my family. I hope that Maddie found her soulmate, and that they believe in fate like she does, and that she never decided to mace another boyfriend for not asking her to marry him at the exact time that she expected it. I have 3 crazy ex-girlfriend stories. One was a coworker, and she was bipolar, and that was not the problem. It was that she would go off her meds from time to time. One time, out of the blue, she walked up to me and punched me in my arm. Thanks to the thick material of the jacket we wore, it only left a slight bruise, but it did hurt. The other time she was off her meds again, but this time she bit me in my arm. Not a playful bite, either. She walked up and stood next to me. She was there for a few minutes, I think, when she leaned forward a little. I thought she was looking at the meat cooler when she turned her head and sunk her teeth into my arm. I swear if not for that jacket, she would have left a mark. That, too, really hurt. She didn't work there long after that. The second one is short, as I don't remember much about her, except that I thought she was nice at first. Other than being rude, she wasn't violent that I saw. I broke up with her and found out from my sister-in-law that she was a stalker, and would stand at the curb by our driveway and just stare at the house in the middle of the night. She only did this a few times and stopped. I don't know if they scared her off or what. The third one happened in 86 to 87. My mom had people come in to help clean her house. One was a nice lady, and we would talk when she cleaned. We got along fine. At least, I thought. We dated for about 6 months. It was then that I started seeing what others already saw in her, but didn't know how to tell me that I would believe. I was in love with her. She was my 3rd girlfriend. I guess that was why I didn't see what she did was so wrong. We never cuddled on the couch, never kissed. We took a shower together, but she wouldn't even let me wash her back. In '87, I went close to Los Angeles from Oceanside to learn to drive semis. She had a job in LA in a bar. I was talking to her on the phone, and she told me that she quit the job as she knew that I wouldn't want her to drive to LA. I asked if she had another job, and she said no, and that I could take care of her. That one was the kicker. So I did. To the curb. Then I found out she had no respect for others' property. The youngest son of my mom's boyfriend was living with us, and he told her to not go into his room. She did, and she threw away things that he wanted to keep. One time we went over to her friend's house and she let the cat outside. I found out her friend had already told her to not let her cat out of the house. I got a $5 gift and a birthday card, and she got mad that I didn't give it to her. My mom told me after we broke up. Mom also fired her. It was more that she looked like she was cleaning the house than doing actual cleaning. Then, for several months, she would keep coming around to the house, demanding that I should take her back, saying, "What about my feelings?" That she needed me and I needed her. I mean, we're talking like 4 months or more. I kept telling her that I don't know about your feelings, but that this is how I feel. Then, I finally told her, "I don't care about your feelings. We're through. You don't respect yourself or others. Now I see that you never loved me at all." She finally stopped coming by, and in December of '89 I left California for good, and never saw her again. I've been debating whether to share this for a while, but the more I think about it, the more I think I should. It's not terribly creepy until the end, but it's definitely a crazy ex story, and maybe sharing it will be a good thing. I don't know, but either way, I'm sending it in now, so there's no turning back. This all happened about 2 years ago, back in 2022. A bit of background, I used to date this girl named Ashley, and we dated for about 6 months. I know that's not a very long time, but when we got together, we moved pretty fast. Things went from 0 to 60 in no time between us, and I was all in. She was funny, smart, and seemed to get me. And then about a month or two in, she went from 60 to 120, and it caused major issues. She got super jealous of everything I did. She tried to tell me that I couldn't talk to my female coworkers, which included my boss. And she even got mad at me for talking to my mom because, quote, she should be the only woman in my life. There were a few other things, but these were the reddest of flags. So, after a bit, I ended up breaking things off. She didn't take it well, at all. And she kept texting me for weeks, but I thought eventually she would just move on. They eventually slowed from 100 a day to a few a week, and I figured that a gradual decline was better than non-stop. The first awkward/weird thing that happened after we broke up was about 2 months after we split. I was in a store needing to pick some stuff up for home, just random things. I turned down one of the aisles, and of course, there she was, staring at the shelves and lost in thought. My heart skipped a beat. We hadn't spoken in 2 months, and part of me wanted to walk to the other corner of the store to try to avoid her, but then I thought that that would be rude. So, I took a breath and walked down the aisle and decided to say hi to her. Just a simple, "Oh, hey, Ashley," like a nonchalant and quick comment about us being in the same store. She looked up and seemed genuinely surprised to see me, saying, "Oh, hey, it's been a while." And there were some awkward niceties between us, just comments about how we looked, how things were going, until I decided that I should excuse myself and finish my shopping. We said goodbye, and that was the end of it. When I started walking towards the checkout lane, I noticed that there was a guy standing at the end, just kind of watching me. I was in self-checkout, so I just assumed this guy took his job of watching the people ringing themselves up very seriously. I finished ringing up my stuff, paid, and as I was walking away from the register, the man stepped in front of me, causing me to pause and look at him. He stared at me aggressively and said, "Sir, can you please come with me?" That was when I noticed that his name tag said General Manager, and I was even more confused. What would the GM of the store want with me? I asked him what was going on, and he very sternly just said, "Please, just come with me." I did, because why wouldn't I? We got to a small section near where the offices were, and the man finally turned and said, "Someone in the store reported that you were shoplifting. They said that they saw you shove something into your pockets and into your pants." I was completely taken aback, and I told him that I hadn't taken anything. They asked if they could search my bags and if I would be willing to empty my pockets, to which I completely agreed. I know that I probably could have denied it, said that my rights were being violated, but in the end, I was more appalled that I was being accused, and felt the need to prove myself innocent. I handed them all my stuff, turned my pockets inside out, shook the legs of my pants, all in an effort to show that they were wrong. After they were satisfied that I hadn't taken anything, they let me go with nothing more than a mumbled apology, which I will say was inadequate considering. As I left the store, I saw Ashley standing outside by her car watching me exit with this evil-looking little smile on her face. And that's when it clicked. She was the person that reported me. I was certain of that, but why? To mess with me? In the end, I blew it off, thinking that she must be incredibly miserable to be willing to do something so petty to get back at me for breaking up with her. Then came the next step in her pettiness: the posters. I was walking to my car from my apartment about a week after the whole store thing, when I saw a poster of some sort stapled to an electrical pole outside of my building. It looked like a missing poster, but then when I looked at it again, I realized the picture on the poster was of me. And it didn't say missing. It said, "Warning, this man is a cheater and a thief, do not trust him." It went on to detail a bunch of random lies about me, saying I was abusive, that I stole money from her, and a bunch of other crazy accusations. I tore the poster down and was furious, but then realized that the person that had put it up was probably Ashley. As I drove to work, I saw more of the posters stapled to random light poles along the route, and as much as I wanted to stop and tear them all down, I didn't have time. I had to just accept that they were there and hope that the next rainstorm would take care of them. I considered calling the cops, but then I thought, what the hell would I tell them? My ex is putting up mean posters about me all around town? It sounded ridiculous, and I had zero proof that it was her. That was the worst part, that I could not prove that it was Ashley. I tried to message her on Facebook, but she had to have blocked me because I couldn't find her account. I tried to text her and call her, but none of it would go through, which tells me she had my number blocked. I was livid, but I had to move on, mostly for my own sanity. The final straw was about 3 days after the posters. I had gotten home from work late and decided to just zone out and watch TV for a few hours. After around 11, I decided to call it a night, but as I walked into my bedroom, something felt off. I felt this really strange need to check everything. Like something was out of place, but I didn't know what. I checked my windows to make sure they were locked. They were. I walked back and checked the front door, and it was locked too. Then I got back to my bedroom, and for some reason, I felt like I needed to check my closet. I have a decent-sized walk-in closet in the back corner of my room. I opened the door, and there, standing amidst my clothes, was Ashley. She was just standing there with a big grin on her face like she pulled the best prank in the world. My heart was in my throat, and I asked her what the hell she was doing. She just tilted her head and chuckled and said, "Oh, hi, And then before I could say anything, she bolted past me and ran out of my apartment. I stood there dumbfounded for way too long before realizing I should call the cops. I did end up calling them, but by the time they showed up, she was long gone. I also had to call the office to have them change and check the locks, because she got into my apartment somehow, and I have no idea how still to this day. What's crazy is that I never saw her again after this. I haven't heard from her, seen her at the store, seen her around town, nothing. It's like whatever she planned got foiled, and she had to disappear, but then that begs the question, what was she planning? Was she waiting for me to fall asleep so that she could do God knows whatever it was she was going to do? Was my life in danger? I have no idea. But thankfully she's gone from my life, at least for now. So that's my crazy ex story, and it's taken me a long time to get back to feeling normal and less paranoid about Ashley. But I'm certainly a lot more cautious about who I let into my life nowadays. So, today, as I was going for a coffee, I decided to check out a new cafe that had just opened. As I go near the door, I am surprised and happy to see an ex-girlfriend of mine from when I was a kid. We stare at each other for a second, and then I see she mumbles something and she comes towards me. I go in for a hug, and after we greet, she just says, "Do you remember what you've done to me?" I was baffled. We dated many years ago and we never had issues of any kind. No major fights, no abuse, no toxicity. As a matter of fact, she left me because I would not commit, but remained on good terms for a while after, still hanging out, until she found a job abroad and left. At first, I was scared witless, and immediately thought there was something strange. I asked to be more specific, but she wasn't telling. After a little chit-chat, she told me that she was referring to the time me and a friend cleansed her house. It came back to me then. At the time, we were stupid, edgy, semi-goth kids, really into the weird and otherworldly stuff. After she complained about feeling her house was, quote, weird, a friend from our group offered to do some cleansing ritual, which he did while we were basically half drunk. According to her, when 7 years later she talked about this thing with other people, stuff started to hit the fan. Like, you could feel presence around the house, drops of temperature, all the good stuff. She was very vague, but apparently she believes some kind of ghost is now possessing her house. Something apparently unleashed after that thing we did, and she started telling her friends about it, because nothing happened in the years prior. She then got back to England, but promptly came back here to escape from an abusive fiancé. At that point, I was really nervous and I excused myself. She hugged me, says now there is only Christ in her heart, and that we should really have a cup of coffee. This gave me some really weird vibes, like weird cult stuff. I basically ran away terrified. Keep in mind, we split on good terms. Very good. She looked after my dog while I was in England. As a masseuse, she took care of my bad back for months. She even introduced me to her new boyfriend and we went out for dinner a couple of times as a group. There is no way she could have held animus against me. Hell, once abroad, she even offered to help find a job for me in the city that she was currently living in. This was not a prank done to get back at me, and more so, her eyes. She was once the light of the room, always laughing and cracking jokes. The person that I found was sad, with very still eyes, not smiling, not anything, like a completely different person. So that, my friends, was a collection of some unfortunate and crazy ex-lover stories. Stories where the exes are the problem, not the O's, just the exes. Get it? Because X and O they go together in the... Anyway. Anyways, crazy X stories. Always... I was gonna say always a fun time, but... No. It's not fun at all. Not fun in the slightest, actually. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, crazy X stories. Terrifying, in my opinion. Maybe you all don't find them terrifying, but I do. Just because the way I look at this, whenever you have crazy X's like these, you have stories about people who were let in very closely into the OP's, the original posters, life. They were very close. They were a couple, So whenever someone's like that close and they turn out to be crazy, scary. Or maybe I'm just overthinking it as I always do, and I'm a silly little boy. Hopefully you all enjoyed these stories. If you did, please do hit that like button. That would be awesome. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button and subscribing to the channel, just getting notified of all the stuff, It helps me to feel better about myself and my content, and the better I feel about myself, the more likely I am to make more content. That's a lie. I make content regardless. Even if no one listened, I would probably still do it for a little while. I just punched my mic. Sorry if you guys heard that. Anyways, what was I saying? Oh yeah, subscribe, comments down below with your thoughts, how you're doing, how you like the stories, etc., how your week's going. You can also join Patreon or memberships to get early access to content like this and other stuff. You can also do a super thanks, which is a tip to the channel, which is never expected, but always appreciated. And you can also listen on other platforms, such as Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, etc., So, yeah. Good stuff, always a good time on this end. All that said, friends, remember that you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, and until next time, my friends, much love, and sleep well.